welcome. Thank you for coming today. We're going to be talking about delivering success and capacity in services. And really what that means to us is addressing the seldom discussed aspect of cloud migration, which is the impact organizationally and operationally. So we're joined today by a few people that are bringing their experiences both as end users and practitioners and service providers in the space to talk about elements like inflection points, reasons why people are moving, how they're moving, the roadmap and methodologies. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists and then ask them to talk specifically about their experiences and perspective to kick things off. So first we have Tim Doherty. He's the COO of Server Farm Realty. And then Dan O'Brien comes to us from the University of Kentucky, where he leads the vendor management team. And then Tony Giampaolo is the principal at PARC Consulting. So why don't we start with Tim? Why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit about your background and why this topic is of interest to you?
Sure, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So as Manon said, I'm the CEO of Server Farm Realty. We're a real estate co-location company based in the U.S. with some foreign assets as well. My background is owner-operator of data centers. I used to I sold a business to private equity. I was one of the forefront of what now is CoreLink for the Carlyle Group. So I've been in this industry for a number of years. And when Manon approached me to talk about this, what I see as an operator of data centers, as an operating engineer of data centers, is the need for certain customers to move certain product set, and if not all of their product set, into the cloud or back out of the cloud for production or development. So what that gives us insight to is not only when there's that inflection point of how data is being utilized by companies effectively, but we see all the process. We see the vendors that come in to help those companies. We see the networks and how they arrange it. We see the connectivity to the various and sundry providers, and there are many, but like Amazon, for example, and how this affects the company, the process, the policy, the management. And it's a curious thing because it is quite a bit of work, but the efficiencies that some companies have and some ideas and the inefficiencies that come out. So as a not necessarily a neutral observer, we do get a lot of insight because we were there through the whole process. So with that, most certainly not an expert on migration and management of one's network into the cloud, because we as a company don't do that, but we see all the process that all the companies go through to do that. So that's one of my adds to this group.
Thanks. Dan?
Dan O'Brien, I lead vendor management UK, go Cats. So at the University of Kentucky, we have a data center that we thought through in 1928, so that we're kind of emerging leaders there in the data center realm. Our data center is built on top of a steam vent, which is also another leading idea there. It turns out that last week, actually, we had a leak on that steam vent, so it kind of further emphasizes the need for us to get out of our data center. So with that being said, we have to get out. We are being forced, more or less, by our provost, who says that they want that 14,000 square feet back for academic teaching and learning resources, and instead of a data center business that, well, frankly, we're not very good at. So that's where we stand today. Our mission is to get out of McVeigh Hall by the latest June of 2017. And the earliest thing that we've heard recently is that it's very likely we actually need to be out of there in October of 2016. We've got a lot of work in front of us.
Great.
Good morning, I'm Tony Giampaolo, PARC Consulting. In previous walks prior to PARC, I managed very large global enterprise data centers and infrastructure services. And my experience has been in data center migrations, providing IT services to the business, and strategic outsourcing of various infrastructure levels and service. At PARC, we spend time with our clients on helping them through those challenges, and it's a very interesting perspective now being on the service provider than in an enterprise, because as Manon said, and some of the items that we'll talk to are the human component to that. What business are you really in as an enterprise and providing service to your business, and how do you deliver service to your business quicker? So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. And by the way, my name is Manon Buettner. I run Nuvalo, which is a Seattle-based IT consulting and sourcing firm. And so what spoke to me specifically about this topic was that I work with business and technology executives in predominantly upper mid-market companies and help them guide through the process of doing the needs assessment and the requirements definition, and really trying to map out ultimately what becomes the cloud strategy for them over the course of several years. And so I also am helping with the service provider selection and helping define models and reference architectures and these types of things that companies in educational facilities, for example, don't have any experience doing. So that's why I really especially liked talking about the operational piece. So with that, I'd like to ask you a question about organizational change management, and I want to start with Dan and just talk about, once the decision was made to move from the data center, just help us understand really what the were, and were there any sort of interdepartmental issues? What were the sort of the more emotional or political aspects of that too?
Sure. So in our own teams, when we were told that we are going to be moving to the cloud, lots of pushback. The first thing was that it can't be done. Really, because there's lots of other people who are doing it and have done it successfully. It's that we haven't done it. So we are very good, I affectionately use the term server huggers. We're very good at hugging our servers and knowing that they work because they're there, we see them and they're operational. So changing their mindset from being the doers who can go down to the data center, touch and configure and modify, to being the managers of doers who touch, configure, and modify, is a significant learning curve for our people. Going outside of our departments, most recently we sent out some notification, maybe we didn't plan it out as well as we could have, to our, basically our customers, which are other departments inside of the University of Kentucky, saying that in accordance with our cloud strategy, we are going out. We're leaving the data center, and all of your stuff actually has to move too. And go figure, we received a little bit of pushback there. And a lot of that was a communication issue. They wanted to know before the fact that we're telling them you have to be out in a year. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's hard. So they are going to get on board too, or we have to leave them behind. We will help them get to where we're trying to go, but we're trying to gain their buy-in one dean at a time. That's leadership in the university.
Okay. So how are you addressing concerns that people are going to be out of a job or feel like they're not going to be able to contribute?
Right. So one of the best things that our CIO and our provost level have done at the university is they've more or less guaranteed that we're not trying to find savings by riffs. We want these people to still be employed by the university, but their jobs change. Instead of being doers, they're managers of doers. So in vendor management, my expectation and what we're relaying to our constituents is that you will become vendor managers. And some are really on board with that. And some have a little bit more a little bit more time in the learning curve to get on board with that. Mm-hmm. They will need to get on board.
Tony, let me ask you, do you feel like that's typical for companies to have the intent to repurpose people? Yeah. I know there's a perception out there that cloud is taking jobs away.
Yeah, I think that folks always tend to get a little nervous, and I really like the server hugger sort of statement or analogy there, because it's true. It's it's the proximity. It's the I can't really do it. But the bottom line is that IT organizations for a very long time have always had to do less with more. And I was part of a very large enterprise that went through and essentially determined that they were going to outsource level 1 and 2 infrastructure and IT services across the board to a third-party provider. And the first reaction of the IT personnel was like, "Oh my God, the sky's falling. We're going to have a job tomorrow." And it was really just the leadership team, and I was part of the senior leadership team at the time, where we really looked at we are doing more with less. We have been. I mean, this is no news. I mean, it's been since the .com fallout in the early 2000s. But really looking at what is core to the value that we're providing the business and what is contextual. And we took an opportunity to really establish that, and the level 1 and 2 is very contextual, and we thought the levels above that were very strategic to the service that IT was providing the business. And it really allowed us to maintain and retain our numbers and personnel and just elevate their skill level all the way up. And it became pretty successful. I think once folks really got comfortable with the fact that their skills and that their depth of service and knowledge would expand, it was a much easier sort of negotiation. But I think initially it's a real daunting for most.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, to compound that, I mean, we see the difference in the type of employees that are ending up staying in data centers. There's a paradigm shift where, back to the server huggers, there were a number of, it's an affectionate term, but the server huggers that are doing reboots and just like the midnight work and patching and cabling. Many data centers, including our company, have services that do that for people now, and their companies are now more into, rather than running data centers, they want to run their applications. They wanted to get the highest and best use out of their people. People are getting retrained. They're sending them to classes in schools to train them to a higher level so they understand networking at a higher level, rather than how to run patch cables and cords and replace memory and hard drives and different things. So as they push some of the elements into the cloud or the entire cloud, the people that continue to have those jobs, which most companies are keeping them, they're just repurposing and retraining them and taking them up a stack into application layer rather than physical management of infrastructure.
Right.
So there's a difference.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We see that every day.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think the big question that people probably want to hear answered is about the road mapping and the methodologies. So once you make the decision to either move out of an on-premise data center or a co-location facility and start putting workloads into clouds, or whether you are already highly leveraged in public cloud and you decided that for whatever reason it's time to take another look and pull back some of those workloads either on-prem or into a data center, or maybe just redistribute workloads to other cloud service providers that might be best suited. I think that there's definitely, once the decision is made, to have a plan in place, right? And so can you talk a little bit, Dan, about sort of how you set out on that course and what that course looks like?
Sure. So it's really a quarterbacked-like approach. So we have hired a cloud financial broker that will be our quarterback, if you would. So the quarterback tells us, after we show them what it is we have and what we need to bring to the cloud, he shows us where we're going to achieve our best value. So it's kind of a layer between us and the provider. So it's kind of like that quarterbacking method there. And what that hopefully will allow us to do is exercise our multi-vendor strategy in the cloud. So we knew that going up there, we need to have a fallback plan. If we go all in on one provider, we felt like we would have too many eggs in one basket. So the idea here is that we have a capability that we are building that will, not easily, but will allow us to migrate from one provider to another, and do that more or less on a broker's whim, if you would. So if the broker determines that he predicts there is a cost reduction in AWS coming in the next quarter, we better get ready to move our workloads from one provider A to provider B. And it's with that mindset that we're moving forward.
Okay. Tony, I thought you'd be a great person to ask around the methodology, working for a consulting firm that advises clients and quarterbacks yourself, people through this process. Maybe you can talk more about the process, business process.
I've always been a big proponent of sort of the service management fundamentals and really understanding the business drivers and how to best align. And when we advise our clients about that, it's really just being in lockstep, not only with the CIO, but with the CIO's reporting structure all the way up. And a lot of times, and similar to your approach, Dan, and I really like the way way you kind of spelled it out, not all the eggs in one basket, and really kind of picking best in breed. Because when you think about it, in my experience in data center operations, you have certain areas where you have a section where there's core services, you have applications and stuff like that, and these are all part of what would make up your data center at large. But I think with the availability of cloud services, what is best, and I haven't found any provider that is a silver bullet for all of them. So I think really kind of having that flexibility and being able to shift workloads and say this provider is great for core services, this provider is great for more infrastructure services relative to applications, et cetera. And that's really the alignment. And I think your mileage will vary. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's really just understanding where your organization is and what the appetite is for not only risk, but investment, and then long-term support and delivery.
Okay. Tim, what are your thoughts on strategy, how people are mapping out their migrations and enacting them?
It's actually somewhat uncharted waters. Process change management, everybody says they do it well, nobody really does. There's a lot of work to it. Our position is kind of a curious position, is when we do see this, we're the facilitator of the facilitators. And as such, it's just helping them and understanding the process, policy, adhering to policy, change management. It is much more work than any one person thinks it is, and the more you understand it, and back to Dan's point, you really have to be cautious of leaving yourself open to liabilities, as you take a look at this. If you're good at it, it would be, in my opinion, amazing, because so few companies have done it, and it's probably the first time you've thought about it. So you're not going to be great at it, but you're going to be diligent. And that's the thing, is just careful steps, policy and procedure. Change management's a very hard thing. I've worked at some very large companies, and nobody I've ever seen is really great at it. They try, but just continually move slowly, vet all solutions, limit your liability, and just be careful of the process that you choose. And it can be accomplished quite well with very, very limited downside risk. But it's just it's a process you have to adhere to stringently. And
Okay.
How we're grouping our workloads, we're calling them maneuvers. So we were talking about earlier today. The maneuvers are basically 5 maneuvers to get us out of our location into the cloud. We broke it down by functional area. ERP is number 1. Number 2 is Exchange. 3 is our general VM farm. 4 is our mission critical VM farm. And 5 is everything else. We have so much of that everything else that are random boxes that we've accumulated over the years that we think we know what's in them, but we don't necessarily know what's in them. And everybody has to get on board, but every one of those maneuvers can very well likely have its own home. And some of those maneuvers are going to have production in one home and dev in another home. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, and I would add to that I think that once you're going through this process and you're committed to making a move, it's the perfect opportunity to take a look at what else you want to improve while you're at it, right? Because you are going to be doing a degree of re-architecting. So I think that to weave in the elements of risk mitigation and BCDR into the new architectures, I think that's a prime opportunity to do that, don't you?
Right, we're re-engineering almost everything we're doing right now. We're given an opportunity to do so why not take advantage? So before we get to that finance stage, it's up to us to show the broker these are all the things we've come up with in our engineering phase. And that engineering phase requires a lot of trial and error. What latency can we get away with? Where can we cut corners? How often do we have to have this turned on?
Yeah. Well, in my experience too, part of the methodology is starting with the baseline audits, right, and the assessments, and what comes from that is the ability to implement the mapping of applications to hardware or assets that in a lot of companies that I've worked with just don't even exist, right? They have servers that are running that they don't want to turn down because they don't know what's on them, and so they're just paying for that power and space for them for years.
I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about.
So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for cleanup and streamlining and efficiencies during the process, right?
Right.
Okay, so I had a note that we would talk about the project management element of cloud migration. Do one of you guys want to start with your thoughts on how project managers are playing a role and how this role might be different than just the normal IT project manager roles have been?
Well, I'll start. Sure, we've assigned a project manager to every one of our maneuvers, and this is a learning curve for all of us involved. I mean, you can go back to the overall project management professional, the PIMP certification. They're the PMP, excuse me. They're trying their best. They're doing what it is they know how to do, but there's so many moving parts. We have so many things that are connected that we don't necessarily know how they're connected. We've tried to map out all these workloads. We've done a good job doing so, but we know there will be opportunities of learning along this process. There will be things that we missed. There will be mistakes made. And we just have to make sure that we fix them quickly and learn and keep going.
Okay. Tony, you have thoughts?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's you're assigning a different project manager to each maneuver. It's not one that's going to handle essentially the whole life cycle for you, or
The project management office is they are communicating like they're all working on every project, so that everyone's in the know. But we do have a project manager for every specific maneuver, because some of these are very, very deep, and I don't think anyone has enough bandwidth to cover all of the maneuvers.
Right.
We're talking about moving our data center. It's not huge by either one of your standards by any means. 14,000 square feet data center, all the stuff in it, being out of there by the earliest of October 2016, the absolute latest drop dead date, June of 2017. If we had more time, I think one person could properly manage it all, but I don't think that they could manage with the level of bandwidth that's required. There's just too many questions that they have to ask and be answered.
Yeah. Well, I think the governance component of it is always valuable. I think in the experience that I've had with these types of migrations, Manon started to lead in about the baseline, the assessment, really kind of pulling in the requirements and then establishing, as close as you can, the finite variables that you're going to track to, milestone, et cetera, is challenging, because back to the point that I was making a little earlier, is the mileage will vary. And I think it's what is being asked of today's project manager is, I think to a degree, a little less than what the typical projects have been. We're going to do an application upgrade, and then hooray, and then everybody's high-fiving. It's really that ability to be a little agile and responsive, and take advantage of key learnings as it will, essentially, be the basis of not only measurement but just progress in latter phases for you guys. So I don't know if I really added much to that, other than it's a very interesting time and challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've seen too that people feel, companies that are engaging in this may not have the skill set that they feel comfortable with, so they do look to third parties to pull in people that know specifically about the providers that they're either coming or going to and between, for that added expertise, right? And not just depending on their engineers and architects.
That's true.
Yeah,
and that's been a great part for us to be able to provide some service, because it's that level of, I think, that objective look, or rather just that objectivity in terms of that practice and that outside opinion, which is.
Well, and you're bringing with you the lessons that you've learned in every one of the projects beforehand that we're going to be missing out on, that our project managers will develop throughout our projects, but they don't know those things today.
Right.
We can read as much as we can, but if you haven't been in it.
Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give Tim for risk mitigation?
Well, it's interesting. The risk mitigation is to the point you guys have just been talking about. I recently went through as a provider of services, a very large publicly traded company that had two different data centers. They migrated into one, and they pushed their dev up into the cloud. And they finally hired a third-party cloud migration expert, and the first lesson that person taught them is you don't know what you don't know. There's a lot of very educated, intelligent people sitting in this room. You all know your applications, your process, your change management. You've never done this before. So the point being is being very open to drivers and mechanisms that are delivered by third parties. So really accept what people tell you as your third-party migration specialist, because they actually know more than you do because you've never done it again. So for risk management, is don't bring to the table your own preset ideas of how process and change should go when you push this. Really accept other people's input and design something that's creative but will morph, because no matter what you put down, it will change. Because there's so much, like you said, you have servers and go, what do those do? I don't know, but they've been up for 1,400 days. It's just, there are things that come up, and as I'm sort of a neutral third-party person when looking at many of these, and I just roll my eyes and walk out of the room because there's so much change that happens so quickly. So really be open, accept the change from the professionals you hire, listen to them, because actually, although they don't know your systems, they don't need to know your systems, and as such, they may be better suited to be able to deliver to you a process because they're not going to be mired in the thought of your systems, they're just in their own process.
Yeah.
I would do that.
Okay. Do you guys have additional thoughts on advice around risk mitigation?
Well, one of the best things that we've been able to do so far, I found out about yesterday being approved, is that we are hiring a third party to help us negotiate the clients with the negotiate the agreements with our IaaS providers. I know how to negotiate contracts with software. I can do hardware. My procurement and legal teams know both very well. We do it every day. What we don't know is how to buy IaaS and the best terms that we need to be negotiating in every one of our contracts. So we are going to the best in class. We are going to that third-party provider to help us make sure that we avoid any risks that they've seen their clients in a first-generation contract have. Where are the contract risks? Try to get that out of the way so that it turns out to be application risks that we impose on ourselves, if anything.
Great. Tony?
Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to add. I mean, other than, risk is always a factor, whether you're with a provider or internally. And I think the fact that, one might look to go to a provider, they're identifying not only an opportunity, but a potential risk within their own environment, whether it's facility risk, whether it's a spend risk. And I think it takes many forms. The risk mitigation to me is, planning. It's hard to forecast, what you can't foresee. But I think, having the timeliness of the plan, understanding what the potential exposure is to the business, whether it's financially, whether it's compliance, whether it's, loss of service, and really having a very well executed plan that you try and ensure is true, has been a pretty good formula for success in my professional career and my consultative career. So,
yeah. So just to dovetail on that, I would say that there's always been these projects and inflection points that we've had for years throughout IT, right? Whether it's hardware and software refresh, or data center consolidation or expansion, or whether it's financial or security driven or compliance driven. There's all kinds of reasons why something needs to happen and change. What's different today are the options that exist, right? Because it's not just about replacing it internally now. It's about, am I going to put it in a colo facility or a cloud provider, and which cloud model is going to suit me best, and which provider should I use based on that model that I decide to go with. So I feel like, I think that's absolutely on point with the fact that companies aren't going to have that kind of experience in-house, absolutely. And so they can try, and they can take a long time, and they'll figure it out. It's not rocket science, but how long is it going to take them? And would those people internally tasked with that be better suited, doing something more?
right. Yeah, do they even have the bandwidth to do that, right? In addition to their regular job.
Right. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, if anybody has any.
Yeah, I did. Go ahead.
I had one question. I walked in just a little late, so I didn't get the background. So Did you guys already have like kind of a workload placement strategy in place, or is this something you had to work towards creating as part of this, we must move out of our data center?
Our strategy on the majority of our workloads was to procure servers that basically ran at 110% of whatever we needed at the time. So the benefit that we're going to find in the cloud is that we can buy what it is we need when we need it. And that's our theory. And we're working through it right now. I have many SOWs coming in for a lot of these workloads that we're going to begin testing. And we'll see if we can't make that a reality.
May I ask a follow-on to that? Was there a financial driver as well? I mean, it seems that there's certainly a capacity and the availability to consume resources, but was there more sensitivity to OpEx versus CapEx, or what financial decisions kind of did you guys take into play? Just out of curiosity, if you could share.
Sure. The biggest driver by far was the fact that we have to give back the space, because being a landlocked university, that's one of the only things we can't get back is space. So releasing 14,000 square feet back to the university so that they can teach and learn and do research was the driver. From the financial aspect, we have done a great job putting Band-Aids on our system for a long time. That's what we've been doing. We've been doing more with less for a very long time. So we've been deferring that maintenance. Right now, we've done lots of analysis based on what would it cost to do something like an apples-to-apples comparison, turning our Band-Aid solution into something that's closer to world-class. And it's not even close to doing that, upgrading all of our systems, getting them back in line with what they should have been for a long time, is much, much more expensive than us going toward more of an OpEx or an OpEx point of view in the cloud. So we will be able to save money if you're comparing apples to apples. But the real benefit that we're going to find is that it's not apples to apples at all. Even if we did that, we would still have a DR that's questionable. We wouldn't be running at all a world-class data center. And what we're trying to buy into is all of our instances are going into world-class data centers with the proper level of DR and security applied to each one. So we're going to be, regardless of the spend, which we think is going to be good, we find that our risk profile goes down significantly, moving our workloads off-prem.
Right.
I have one, and that's about the testing, moving over from now that you've got your own particular systems. If you don't have your own baseline, your Band-Aid solutions, and you're moving into the cloud, they're two very different operational paradigms in how you're actually going to be delivering on-demand services. I mean, I know Tim can point to the fact of it takes a while to build brick and mortar for that on-demand space. So have you been able to do a life cycle analysis of moving towards how much space you need, how much capacity, how much power, how much I/O factor you need? Have you gone through that phase, or is that part of the process now going forward?
That is part of the process going forward. So we do have good estimates on what we have right now. We do have good estimates of what we're using right now. But we'll really know in this testing phase. And that's where it's going to start. So it's really just putting our feet in the water, making mistakes, spinning up instances, pulling them back down. I mean, trial and error. And what can we live with? How can we cut some corners? That's how we're going to find savings, is the other real way.
Great. Well, that wraps it up then. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.